I made this video for Ark Survival Evolved a while ago to really go in depth with all the stats of the players and unveil any hidden aspects they may possess, as well as give a clear understanding to what each stat does. So now we're here and we're going to do the same thing for Ark Survival Ascended. Let's start with health. Health is pretty straightforward. The more health you have, the more damage you can take until you eventually perish. Health goes up by 10 points per level. And did you know that if you have over 500 health, you can survive a fall from any height? Not consecutively, of course, but it could still come in handy if you accidentally dismount one of your birds and you don't have any parachutes. Also, if you have over 500 health, you can eat organic polymer without dying. Not very useful, but cool to know. And now that movement speed is not a stat you can level by default, there's no reason not to go to 500 HP. Next we have stamina. Much like health, this is fairly self-explanatory. The more stamina you have, the longer you can hit things, run, or jump until your character gets tired. The 100 stam by default is pretty bad, but I've found that about 250 to 300 stamina is the sweet spot for me. And just like health, stamina goes up by 10 points per level. Now oxygen is an interesting stat. Oxygen goes up by 20 points per level, and the more oxygen you have, the longer you can hold your breath before you start to drown. One of the hidden qualities of the oxygen stat in Ark Survival Evolved was that the higher oxygen you had, the faster you swam. But here in Ascended, oxygen is different. We have 150 by default instead of the normal 100. Let's see if the more oxygen you have, the faster you swim. This is a lap I took with default oxygen. You can see it's pretty slow. And if we put another lap up right next to it of 500 oxygen as opposed to the 150, you can see that they're still the same speed. So no, oxygen does not level movement speed in water anymore. Next we have food and water, and I paired these two stats together because, well, to be honest, you should never level either one of them, ever. Both of these stats go up by 10, and neither one of them provide any real benefit worth more than, one of the other stats. The more food you have, the longer you can go before you start to starve, and with water, the same thing, but with dehydration. Weight is a big and very useful stat. Whenever your character is above 40% of their total weight, you'll start to notice a decrease in your character's speed. At 80% of your total weight, you'll be slightly encumbered. This means you'll still be able to move and jump, but you won't be able to sprint. And then at 85% of your weight, you become officially encumbered, meaning you can only walk slowly without sprinting or jumping. And finally, at 100% or more of your weight, you won't be able to move. Luckily, Ascended brought about an incredible quality of life change to some of the dinos. I'm talking specifically about shoulder pets. In Evolved, the only shoulder pet you could access the inventory of while it was on your shoulder was the Sonoma crops. And that was only available on Lost Island. I've always complained about this not being a feature for every shoulder pet, but luckily Ascended has answered my prayers, and now every single shoulder pet can have their inventory managed while they're on your shoulder. But so what? What does that have to do with weight? What's the big deal? Well, any shoulder pet, whatever weight they're carrying, only half of that weight is transferred onto your character. This monkey has 100 pounds of wood in it, and our character is empty. But if we pick up the monkey, instead of gaining the full 100 pounds onto our character, we only get 50. This makes all shoulder pets backpacks for your character. And this means you don't necessarily need as many points into weight, because eventually, well, you're always going to have a shoulder pet. Weight goes up by 10 per level, and I usually go for about 350 to 400. Melee damage is kind of a slept-on stat. Sure, typically you're not really doing melee combat. Even in PvP, it's usually ranged weapons, but melee can be helpful and fun to level at the same time, especially if you're going for a specific kind of build. Melee goes up by 5% per level, and the more melee damage you have, the stronger melee weapons will be. Swords, pikes, clubs, hatchets, all of that. And yes, that does also include torpor damage for the clubs. And this doesn't just apply to combat either. No. You will also harvest resource nodes faster with a higher melee damage. See, now I just need to see a clip of someone with all their points into melee knocking out a Giga with an Ascendant club. Next is crafting skill, and this is probably one of the most important stats for your character, but it's also usually one you're never going to level. Crafting skill goes up by 10% per level, and this will make you craft items faster than you normally would, but it's also very useful regarding blueprints. This only applies to blueprints you can find from, say, a standard drop or a cave loot crate. This doesn't apply to your normal engrams. But if you put points into crafting skill, the more points, the more difference it would make. You can craft blueprints and the resulting crafts will come out to be much better than the blueprint initially said it would be. Most people usually just take a mind wipe tonic and put all their points into crafting skill whenever they're about to make a bunch of blueprints, say your saddles for your boss dinos. And then when they're done, they mind wipe again and put their points back to how they were. On some servers, there is a 24-hour cooldown on how frequently you can mind wipe your character though, so be careful about that. But also, hey, wait a minute. Ascendant has built-in mods now, in-game. It's not just Steam players that can have those. And this means I can give a shout out to one of my favorite quality of life mods. This mod is called the Crafting Skill Potion by Firesalt. This mod adds one simple potion into the game. It temporarily mind wipes your character and puts all the points you would have had at your level into crafting skill instead. And then when the potion's effects run out, your character goes back to their normal stats again. What's really nice about this potion is you don't lose your engrams from mind wiping. That means you don't have to scroll through all your engrams after you fix your stats to relearn everything. Again, that's the Crafting Skill Potion by Firesalt. Next we have Fortitude. This is one of, if not the most important stat for your character, especially with movement speed being removed by default. Fortitude controls many things. How your character resists torpor buildup, how likely you are to get mega rabies from bats, your temperature resistances, and also how fast your food or water will drain. Fortitude only goes up by 2 per level, and I find a minimum of 40 to be good for Ascended. If you really want to be comfortable, go to 50 plus and you'll be fine. And with having a higher fortitude, this will allow you to wear armors like Flak in the lava or snow cave and not be knocked out by Surprise Trudon or Titanoboa attacks. And while this stat is no longer levelable by default, it's still something we should go over because it is a stat you can enable for your server. And that's movement speed. Speed goes up by 1.5% per level, and it's as simple as it sounds. The more speed you have, the faster you're going to move. On normal servers where speed leveling is not allowed, the only way to increase your movement speed is with something like Focal Chili, which increases your speed by 15%. If you are playing on a solo world and you want to enable leveling of this stat again, just go to Game Rules, then World, and you'll have all the options for allow speed leveling and allow flyer leveling. And you can also do the same if you're hosting a server. But hold on, we aren't quite done yet. Remember I said back in Evolved, Oxygen would level up your swim speed. Well, what about in Ascended if we have movement speed leveling enabled? In this side-by-side, you can see one character swimming significantly faster than the other. There's 0 buffs applied and nothing but levels put into them. When we look at the stats, the answer is obvious. The character with the higher oxygen is swimming significantly faster. So oxygen does still level swim speed, but only if movement speed leveling is enabled on the server. Weird. Thanks for watching, boys. If you made it this far, hopefully it helped you out a bit. I make a ton of great ARK guides, and if this helped, maybe consider subscribing or sending this to one of your brain-dead tribe mates who doesn't know how to play the game. I'll see you in the next one, boys. Deuces.